Welcome to the EU-Japan 100 Cities event on climate action, organized by the Delegation of the European Union to Japan and the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, IGES. My name is Naoki Mori, Program Director of IGES. Today is the first day of a two-day event, which we aim to contribute to the discussion on how EU and Japan can enhance cooperation at the city level in order to meet the shared goal of net zero emissions by 2050. We hope you enjoy the presentations and discussions that we follow. Then I'd like to just introduce the speakers today. First, I'd like to invite Mr. Heise Zimmers, Deputy Head at the Delegation of the European Union to Japan. But unfortunately, he's not yet ready. So I'd like to ask the next speaker. I welcome Mr. Hiroshi Ono, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs. Sorry. Sorry, Mr. Jimmers, sorry. So I'd like to kindly invite Mr. Heise Zimmers, Deputy Head of the Delegation.
Heise Zimmers is not available yet, so I am Jean-Éric Paquet. I'm the European Union Ambassador to Japan.
Oh, thank you.
So I'm stepping in.
Thank you very much.
I'm particularly happy to be able to say a few words, as was initially planned, to open this particularly important seminar between European cities and Japanese cities, and of course also policymakers and administrations in Europe and Japan, which are teaming up on our green transformation. And to do this together with Ono-san, Vice Minister in the Ministry of Environment. Ono-san, it's a pleasure to see you virtually this afternoon. And I'm doing this on the basis of Europe and Japan's Green Alliance, which was agreed back in 2021, where leaders on both sides identified our climate challenges and environmental challenges as an absolutely key topic of Europe and Japan's common work in their bilateral relationship, but of course also Europe and Japan wanting to lead and demonstrate that these transformations are possible. They are obviously very necessary, highly urgent, but also possible. Transforming our societies, reducing their environmental footprint, and reducing our CO2 emissions with a net zero CO2 goal by 2050, but a 55% reduction as far as Europe is concerned by 2030 is a particularly high ambition. And what we see in Europe is that a lot of the action, beyond, of course, regulatory frameworks, which are in Europe extremely ambitious and will generate a lot of transformations in industry, in mobility systems, in the way energy is provided, a lot of the action is happening at local level. And I must say I'm particularly impressed and proud that many European cities, and I know this is also very much the case in Japan, that very many European cities have decided to go beyond what is required by policy and legal frameworks, because they know and see that climate change is impacting on their well-being, on the very fabric of those cities, and on the fabric of their societies. And we have in Europe launched back in 2021 a mission asking European cities to come forward on climate neutrality. And we were, and Philippe Froissart from the Department of Research and Innovation, the Commission will come in a short moment. We were very surprised to see more than, I think, 250 cities, or even 350 cities, which said, yes, we want to commit ourselves to climate neutrality, not by 2050, but by 2030. So an extremely ambitious goal, which will require for the 100 cities which have been retained, which are presently discussing with their regional, national, and European partners how to accomplish that fast and deep transformation, to plan with citizens, industries, and all actors in the city how best to achieve that radical transformation from today's city to one which will indeed be carbon neutral with some offsetting, but carbon neutral by 2030. I don't think in my many years as policy maker in the EU setups, I have seen a lot of work happening between cities, but this is the first time that I see cities committing not just to good practices, but to a fully fledged transformation with partners around them coming on board, providing funding, providing innovation, providing science, so that indeed this high ambition by 2030 is increasingly credible. And if indeed these 100 cities achieve their objective, we believe that they will bring many, many more cities in Europe on board, therefore accelerating Europe's CO2 reduction and helping Europe achieve the 55% reduction. As I said at the outset, I know a lot is happening in Japan as well. And this is why I find today's seminar so exciting. And this is also why I'm so happy to say these few words, to really encourage Japanese cities and European cities to be in constant interaction. I know this is largely the case already. The seminar today and tomorrow will create an additional platform to connect experiences so that what is happening in Europe can inspire in Japan, and the solutions you are finding in Japan can also inspire in Europe. And with that, I wish you a productive today's seminar, and thank you very much for setting this up today.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ake. Very encouraging opening remarks. Thank you very much. Then now I'd like to just welcome Mr. Hiroshi Ono, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs, Minister of the Environment of Japan. Mr. Ono, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mori-san, for your kind introduction. Do you hear me? Okay. Ambassador Heitze Ziemels and Mr. Takahashi Yasu, Executive Director, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, distinguished guests and participants, good afternoon. It is my great honor to be invited today, and I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the co-organizers, delegation of the European Union to Japan and IGES for hosting this important event. Leaders of Japan and the EU announced the launch of the EU-Japan Green Alliance in May 2021, which includes recognizing, supporting, and accelerating climate actions at the subnational levels. Today's event is an activity under the Green Alliance. Cities, which account for approximately 70% of global GHG emissions, are at the forefront of making global efforts to address climate change, as highlighted in the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan adopted at COP27. Turning to Japanese perspective, responding to the national commitment to achieve net zero by 2050, Japanese government developed the regional decarbonization roadmap in June 2021. That is a blueprint for national and local governments to jointly move forward towards a net zero, circular, and nature positive city. As a concrete step, Ministry of the Environment of Japan plans to designate 100 or more decarbonization leading areas which strive to realize net zero by 2030, 20 years ahead of national target year of 2050. So far, 46 areas have been designated and are implementing their unique actions on the ground. Among such leading areas, Kamishihoro Town, where Mayor Takenaka is here with us today, is committed to decarbonization through biogas power generation using methane gas generated from livestock manure. Also, City of Yokohama is working on an innovative model for procuring renewable-based electricity from remote areas out of the city, which have high renewable energy potential. Local financial institutions also play a key role in financing on-the-ground project investments. We will have a presentation tomorrow on how local authorities and commercial banks can collectively work on cities' decarbonization initiatives. Such demonstrated best practices are expected to be replicated across the country and beyond through an international city-to-city collaboration program. I appreciate that the EU has also launched a mission in 2022 to create 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030, as explained by the ambassador. I appreciate the similarity of the two initiatives in concept and look forward to learning the progress of the EU initiatives and mutual communication and collaboration for reinforcing each other. The decarbonization of cities and subnational areas is a significant challenge for both Japan and EU, but both of us are determined to make this happen and show our leading models to the world. This event is one such good example. Lastly, G7 Ministerial Meeting on Climate, Energy, and Environment will be held in Sapporo City, in Hokkaido, Japan, in April this year. As the G7 presidency, Japan is willing to further advance G7 dialogue on subnational climate actions, focusing on the facilitative role of national government in particular. I look forward to enhanced collaboration with EU in this important agenda under the G7. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ono, for your remarks. Now, may I welcome Mr. Yasu Takahashi, Executive Director, Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. Mr. Takahashi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mori-san, for your introduction. Good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure and honor to have this opportunity to address you today as co-organizer for the EU-Japan 100 City event on climate action. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the head of the European Union mission to Japan, Ambassador Jean-Éric Paquet, and the Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs, Mr. Ono Hiroshi, for their presence today. Let me also thank the distinguished experts from the EU and Japan who will present the latest initiatives from their cities and regions to achieve carbon neutrality. Dear participants, a new global economy is rapidly developing as countries try to accelerate their respective transition towards a carbon neutral, circular, and resource-efficient economy over the coming decades. This also means that every country needs to identify how it can benefit from the opportunities offered and how it should navigate the challenges that emerge on the transition pathway. Globally, cities consume more than 65% of the world's energy, accounting for more than 70% of global CO2 emissions. It is therefore crucial that cities act as experimental and innovation ecosystem to help others in their transition to become carbon neutrality by 2050 at the latest. However, it is impossible for individual countries to face this challenge alone. The EU-Japan Green Alliance allows us to learn from each other's pioneering work on policies. This two-day event is designed for both the EU and Japan to gain mutual benefit from experiences at the local level in the fields of energy security and resilience, the role of local decarbonization in the local economy, smart cities and innovation, and how low-carbon financing frameworks. Presentations will feature topics such as gender and climate and collaboration beyond administrative borders as other vital aspects when considering local climate actions. Our speakers today are from local and regional governments and their partners who represent initiatives to develop 100 carbon neutral model cities or regions in the EU and Japan. I am sure you agree that they are true pioneers. I believe that sharing good practices and solutions will motivate and increase the enthusiasm towards decarbonization. In closing, I would like to express my sincere hope that this seminar will be fruitful for the innovative urban policies of both EU and Japan. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Takahashi. Then let us start discussions in the panels from now. We are very fortunate to have as moderator Ms. Terry Schultz, who is based in Brussels and well versed in foreign policy and security issues. With her expert moderation, I believe we'll have an interesting discussion on urban policies. Okay, the floor is yours, Ms. Schultz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mori. I'm very pleased myself to be joining you all to help guide discussion on such an exciting issue at such an important time. As we've already heard from all the speakers this morning, curbing cities' emissions is crucial to global climate protection, and I'm very much looking forward to learning more about these very brave and innovative efforts to do that over the next 2 days. So I would also like to welcome all our speakers and thank those who've gone so far. Thank you to Mr. Paquet for stepping in, and also welcome to our audience who are joining us from around the world. So starting us off for the rest of the day will be Mr. Pierre Versard. He's actually just down the road from me in the European Commission here in Brussels. He's the head of the cities mission there in the European Commission's Directorate General for Research and Innovation. Mr. Versard has been working on urban development and future mobility systems. So this is really the future that we're going to be looking at for many cities. Mr. Versard, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen, if I may. Here we go. I hope you can see it. Yes. I'm just going to go through the large screen. So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to say a few words on the cities mission that has been introduced already by Jean-Eric. I will just provide a little bit more information as regard where we are, the state of play of the implementation of this mission. My first slide is actually very much in line with what has been already presented by the previous speakers, which is basically the fact that cities are the place where we can have the biggest impact if we want to have a strategy for climate neutrality. The reason is very simple. Most of the citizens in EU and in Japan, admittedly, we are in the similar situation, live in cities. That trend is likely to increase in the years to come. We have as a target to have 85% of the citizens in the EU living in cities by 2050. And as a consequence of that, most of the energy that is consumed in the world is consumed within the boundaries of cities. Most of the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted presently are actually in cities. So if we have an action targeting cities for developing a strategy on climate neutrality, we have to do it in cities because that's where we will have the biggest impact. And I think for us in Europe, it's very important to have cities on board for this strategy for climate neutrality, because it responds to the objective of the Green Deal, which is to have Europe as a climate neutral continent by the horizon of 2050. We are talking a lot about reduction of greenhouse gas emission, and that is one of the objectives of the mission, but there are also quite many co-benefits that are of interest for cities and citizens. The fact that, for instance, pollution will decrease if we develop that strategy for climate neutrality. There will be less congestion on the streets. There will be very likely safer mobility, more secure energy supply, which is also something very important and that has been demonstrated in the recent months with the war in Ukraine. And at the end of the day, what we want to design and what we want for our citizens is to be able to live in livable and lovable cities. When preparing the mission, we had a lot of exchanges with cities in different member states. And what we saw was that the cities, the local authorities, but also the citizens, which are closely involved in this process, have the ambition to go even further than what we are presently doing. And that was very reassuring for us and led us think that putting forward this mission on climate neutrality was the right way to have also all citizens in the EU on board. The objective of the mission are twofold. The first one is actually to identify and support 100 cities in Europe to become climate neutral by the horizon of 2030. As stressed by Jean-Eric before, this is a very ambitious target. So we are very lucky and privileged to have actually attracted the attention of quite many cities when we launched our call for expression of interest. And we had more than 370 cities that actually responded to this call for expression of interest. And that shows that there is really a demand and an interest from the cities and the citizens on this subject of climate neutrality. But supporting 100 cities is one of the objectives. It's not the only objective. The second objective is to use these cities as experimentation and innovation hubs to make sure that all other cities in Europe become climate neutral, not in 2030, but by 2050. And if they can become climate neutral before 2050, it's for the better as well. A word on the distribution of the cities that have been selected in the mission. This is a process that took place last year. As I said, we received quite many applications and we selected 100 cities. What I'm not going to go through the list of all those cities. I apologize because the names of those cities are written in very small characters, so you probably cannot see it, but I invite you to look at our website to get the whole list of cities that have been selected. I should say that there are 100 cities in EU member states, and in addition to that, there are also a number of cities that are located in countries that are associated to the framework program of Horizon Europe. There are 12 of them, which you have listed here. What are the interesting features of these selections is that we have cities in every EU member state. In all 27 member states, we have cities that are participating in the cities mission. Most of the capital cities are also involved in the cities mission. And the direct consequence of that is we are actually targeting quite a large number of the population in the EU with this mission. 12% of the EU population is actually impacted by the cities mission because they are living in the cities that are taking part in the mission. We do not only have large cities participating in the mission, but we also have medium and small cities. That was a wish from our side to start with, to have a good representation of the cities in Europe so that we can replicate the good practices that will be developed by those cities to the other cities in a similar situation in Europe. Maybe I will move to the next slide and explain a little bit the process that we have put in place to help cities develop their strategy for climate neutrality. So we rely a lot on the Horizon Europe for preparing and supporting the cities in this transition. We have put in place what we call the mission platform, which is a project that is providing direct support and advice to cities at technical level. So they provide, they are city advisors that are in direct contact with city authorities, local authorities that will help the cities develop their strategy for climate neutrality. And in addition to that, we have a number of research innovation projects that we are launching that contribute to identify the solutions that will be deployed by those cities in order to match their commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We rely a lot on exchange of good practices between the cities that are involved in this process, and the mission platform will help and facilitate the twinning and the teaming of these cities across Europe. The ultimate goal for those cities is to make use of the service, the advice and the support that will be provided by the mission platform to develop what we call the Climate City Contract. The Climate City Contract is actually a document that is composed of 3 parts. The first one includes the commitment of the local authorities, but also the regional and the national authorities. It could also be a document where the commitment of the private sector is mentioned, because we all know that it's not only about public investment, but private investment, and the commitment of the private sector, the industry in particular, is very important if we want to fulfill our objective of climate neutrality. So this is that part of the Climate City Contract where we have all these commitments. Then the second part is the action plan, where we will list by sector the different targets that needs to be achieved by the cities to reduce their greenhouse gas emission. And the last component, the last part of the Climate City Contract is actually very important, is the investment strategy, where we present the budget and investments that are required to fulfill the action plan that is in the Climate City Contract. At the end of this process, the Commission will award a mission label to the cities that have successfully designed and developed their Climate City Contract. And that will help cities, that should help cities unlock additional funding that will come from EU programs and initiatives, admittedly, but also can come from national sources or also from private investors. So this is in a nutshell the scope of the cities in Europe with the cities mission. We have done already a survey of the needs and the demands from the cities when dealing with this aspect of climate neutrality. And the first challenge that the cities have identified is naturally the one regarding funding and access to financing. So this is the main priority, that the main challenge that they are faced with. And the cities mission, the mission platform in particular, has the resources to help the cities access additional funding and financing schemes. The second priority or challenges that the cities face is the fact that there is a large fragmentation of responsibilities at local authorities to deal with. Most of the local authorities are working in sectors. For instance, you have the mobility sector, the energy sector, and so the management of the waste sectors, and so on. And we need to work across those sectors if we want to develop a coherent strategy for climate neutrality. So this is a challenge that has been acknowledged by the cities, and to which the mission platform can contribute to as well. And the third point, also very important, is the fact that there is a lack of operational capacity in many of the cities that are involved in the cities mission in Europe. And there again, the mission platform can provide help, assistance, technical advice to build capacities inside the local authorities to help them develop the strategy on climate neutrality. So I mentioned already a little bit the Climate City Contract, but I will not elaborate further. There are a number of components in that Climate City Contract. They are available on our website. So if you are interested in these documents and to look at what we are asking the cities to develop, I really invite you to go to our site and read these documents. What I would like to do now is to talk about another initiative, which is also a mission which we have launched at COP26 in 2021, which is the international outreach to a large extent of what we do in Europe with the European Cities Mission. It's an initiative that was launched in the context of mission innovation. Mission innovation, for those of you that are not familiar with, is a global initiative of 23 countries and the EU, and that aim to make clean energy affordable, attractive, and accessible for all. I should stress that among the 23 cities that are, the 23 countries that are part of mission innovation, there is Japan. And in the context of mission innovation, as I said, in COP26, we launched a new mission that targets specifically urban transition. So the objective of this mission, this urban transition mission of mission innovation, is to a large extent very similar to what we do in Europe with the cities mission, but at a global scale. The different actors that are involved in the implementation of these missions, we have 3 co-leads. The Commission is one of the co-leads. The Global Covenant of Mayors and Urban Europe are the other two colleagues that are responsible for the preparation and implementation of this mission. And we have a number of mission members, core mission members, that are represented on these slides, where you have Austria, India, Saudi Arabia, Sweden, and Spain that are active core members of this mission. But we have also a large number of other entities in the mission support group. Just to name a few, we have the International Energy Agency, the World Economic Forum, the ITK Climate, and all these organizations and bodies are also contributing to the implementation of this urban transition mission of mission innovation. The objectives of this mission is threefold, and as I said, very likely aligned and in line with what we do in Europe. First of all, is to assemble a cohort of cities in the world, so not only in Europe, and we have as a target to have at least 300 cities by 2024 that would demonstrate integrated net zero pathways. That means testing a framework that will help them develop a strategy for climate neutrality and decarbonization. In order to do that, we also provide some support to the cities through calls for research innovation, where we will be addressing, for instance, the areas of positive energy districts, the 15-minute city challenge, urban circularity. And what we aim to do also is to increase the capacity of the cities that are taking part in this mission of mission innovation through what we call an Urban Transition Mission Center, which is a platform where we will facilitate the exchange of information and good practices between cities involved in this process. I think that's all I wanted to say from my side on the Urban Transition Mission. So there is an opportunity here really for Japanese cities, because we launched at the end of last year a call for expression of interest across the globe to seek the commitment of cities that are interested in this process at the level of the Urban Transition Mission. And we selected a first wave of cities in the world that have expressed an interest in this Urban Transition Mission. There were 48 cities that were selected, and one of them already is from Japan. It's Tokorozawa, which I believe is in the north of Tokyo, and which is one of the cities that has been already selected in the first cohort. Our objective is to launch a second call for expression of interest in the second quarter of 2023, and there will be additional opportunities for Japanese cities to come forward and take part in the implementation of this Urban Transition Mission. So we will keep you informed of these upcoming opportunities. I should mention that we are very happy in this selection of cities, because they are coming from all over the world. Admittedly, quite a number of them are in Europe, and quite many of those cities in Europe are also taking part in the European Cities Mission. And I think the Urban Transition Mission will be a good platform to exchange the information and share the good practices that are developed in Europe to the benefit of other cities across the world. And this exchange of information is something which is important, because we have to learn a lot from the experiences that are established in the different cities in the world on this subject of climate neutrality. So I think I will stop here my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Versard. We're running a little behind time, but I just can't help but want to ask you a question. You mentioned that you had a really enthusiastic outpouring of cities who wanted to take part in this, and saying that this cities program affects 12% of the population of the European Union is really remarkable. But I wanted to ask if you think any of those cities a year later are now struggling with the financial aspects to a degree that we couldn't have predicted. And already you said this was the first challenge that you mentioned. How is the economic downturn globally affecting their commitment, their ability to carry out their pledges?
Well, this is a very good question. Thank you for that, because you're right. We launched the mission in 2021 before the COVID was there already. But before the energy crisis that we are having now in the world and particularly in Europe, when we talk to cities and when we present the mission, the first reaction of the local authorities is to say, well, thank you very much, but we have other priorities at the moment, which is basically to pay our energy bill. And most of the investment that we have at our disposal goes towards the payment of this energy bill. That is very important. But they also realize that the mission is there to accelerate the transition for the green and digital transition, and it's there to move away from our dependency to fossil fuel. So they understand that as well, and in a way, I should hesitate to use this word, but this is the reality. This crisis is an opportunity for cities to move even further and faster away from this dependency on fossil fuel, and they regard the mission as really a good opportunity to speed up their transition. That's the reason why they all have committed and confirmed their commitment on climate neutrality by the horizon of 2030, because they know that there is no way out of it. So I am confident that the cities that have been involved in the mission, that are selected in the urban transition mission and the European cities mission, will maintain their commitment despite the present crisis, because they see that this is actually the solution for them to make huge transformations in their cities and move away from this dependency on fossil fuel, and also in that context, reduce their emission of greenhouse gas emission.
Well, that's encouraging for all of us for our long-term future. Thank you very much, Mr. Versard. Now we're going to move over to Japan. We're going to hear from Ms. Yukawata, the Assistant Director for the Regional Decarbonization Division in Japan's Ministry of the Environment. Ms. Kawata has vast experience in establishing energy-related regulatory systems, and she's going to share her current work on regional decarbonization. Welcome, Ms. Kawata. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I am from the Ministry of the Environment of Japan. My name is Yukawata. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak at this wonderful seminar. And from my side, I would like to talk about what Japan is doing to decarbonize the whole nation. And I hope you can see my slides. So then I would like to jump into my presentation. First of all, I'd like to say that the recent surge in energy prices has a great impact on the livelihood of people and also the local economies. But on the other hand, if you look at Japan, as you look at the map here, compared to energy demand, we have 1.8 times higher renewable energy potential. And based on that, if we can maximize the use of renewable energies, we will be able to get the chance to grow into robust and sustainable cities. So we are focusing on that in our efforts. Now, towards 2050, we are trying to realize carbon neutrality, and by 2030, we want to reduce GHG emissions by 46%. At the ministry, towards this goal, we are focusing on regions and cities in taking measures. For example, we want to focus on renewables and other local resources to vitalize the local economy and also resolve local issues so that we can accelerate efforts to decarbonize as well as vitalize the local economy. Some specific examples. By 2030, in order to simultaneously realize decarbonization and regional revitalization, we are trying to set up model cities. We want to set up at least 100 decarbonization leading areas. So by having these regions focus on this, we will be able to show how decarbonization can at the same time vitalize the region. And then after that, we want to deploy this horizontally. So far, 46 regions have been selected, but we will be selecting new sites twice a year. Now, this slide shows the 46 selected regions and cities. From north to south, you have many cities selected in different areas. They are focusing on their unique local features in taking efforts, and I would like to talk about some projects later on. So the decarbonization leading areas. as well as municipalities and companies that are willing to take part. We have some support for them in terms of human resources development, as well as by providing tools to analyze local economy and potential for renewables. We are providing also financial support, and here we have some examples of financial support. We have subsidies set up for municipalities to use, and this has been established this year. And on the right-hand side, this is loans and investments for decarbonization projects. We have established a public and private fund for this. And already for this, the next fiscal year, we have allocated funding of 40 billion yen. Now, to look at some measures taken in local municipalities. So in Utsunomiya City in Tochigi Prefecture, solar power generation as well as large-scale storage batteries are being used so that LRTs and EV buses can be run 100% on renewables. And also on the consumer side, you have storage batteries that are controlled, and also EV buses will be used as regulated power sources. So we have this advanced EMS system established in the city. Right-hand side is the Sapporo city in Hokkaido. It's utilizing the features of a very cold city. They have a local heat supply network using CN gas and wood biomass to provide electricity and heat that is decarbonized from the city center. The next one is Osaka City, Osaka Sakai City in Osaka. So there's a new town there, which is to be established as a zero energy town or zero emission town. So this is a new town challenge through decarbonization. And in Shikaoi town in Hokkaido, the smell from livestock farms, manure, was a problem here, but now that is being used for biogas power generation. So they now have local power production and supply, and also this is being provided to the residents and local offices. And also this will be supplied to fuel cells as well. And we want to spread these measures overseas through city-to-city collaboration. Japanese cities have been collaborating together with local companies, local financial institutes to organically try to deal with compound local issues. And based on the learnings gained from this experience, we want to make sure that we can spread our learnings to partner cities overseas so that we can accelerate and promote the decarbonization efforts. I'm very sorry that I've been speaking very fast, but that's all from myself. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kawata. And I would just like to thank the interpreters, which I didn't do before, because they kept up with you perfectly. But it's also a reminder for me to speak slowly for them. Thank you very much for that very interesting presentation. And just like Mr. Versard, it certainly didn't seem that there would be any lessening of commitment to carrying forward the city's mission. So that's very encouraging for us as we set out on our 2 days of discussion. Well, now we are going to move into our first panel, and we're going to hear from cities who are actually putting their pledges into action. This panel is going to be on energy security and resilience. Securing energy supplies, affordable energy supplies especially, is one of the top priorities of any city. We've got inflation, war, climate disasters, all making this a more difficult task. So how can local governments cope with energy risks and increase their resilience? We're going to hear examples today from people who are doing just that. Our first speaker will be Mr. Atsushi Otsuki. He is the Director of Regional Revitalization and SDG Promotion Office in the Reconstruction Department in Higashi Matsushima City. His presentation is titled Future Cities Linked Through Earthquake and Disaster Recovery, Circles of People, Energy, and communities for the future. Now, Mr. Otsuki, we understand that Higashi Matsushima City was seriously damaged in the Great East Japan earthquake, and you are needing to become more resilient to disaster planning, to disasters, and that must be the top priority of your city. How are you connecting your climate actions with your disaster resilience? We'd like to hear more about that, and welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I am Otsuki, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. As Terry-san just said, in 2011, Higashi Matsuyama Matsushima City suffered extensively through the Great East Japan earthquake, and we had come up with the plan. Distributive plan was put together, and as one of the leading example, we have Higashi Matsushima Smart Town, and that is in case of disaster, for minimum 3 days, we should be prepared in case of disaster. We have a system in place, and since then, in Higashi Matsuyama City, we have been trying to maintain the development of safe city. Today, I would like to speak on the title of Future Cities Linked Through Earthquake and Disaster Recovery. And we have been selected as one of the decarbonization leading areas, and I'll give you some examples. First of all, if you look at the middle to the left, you find the word hope. Let me introduce to you what this is. Higashi Matsushima City has a future city organization. Higashi Matsushima Organization for Progress in Economy, Education, and Energy. And also, we have been selected as one of the decarbonization leading area. In the recovery from the great earthquake, we have the plan and for the environment and the aging of the society, disaster prevention, we consider this a joint objective. Then this is included in SDGs and the future city plan. And we have implemented various activities, one of which is HOPE. We have initiated this organization so that retail business and distribution business is being operated under HOPE. Furthermore, with the support from MOEJ, we have smart disaster prevention eco-town management, so that through decarbonization policies in the future, we would like to revitalize our local areas. This is very important. Now, I'd like to explain to you the overview of the decarbonization leading areas. We are located in the west of the area in Nobiru, and we have people relocated after the earthquake. We have many areas which is left unused. Nobiru city is having difficult time finding ways to utilize this area, and it was one of the depleted areas that's designated. We have a huge number of issues because of the drop in population. Next, I'd like to talk about the zero emission. The area is plenty of sunlight, therefore we use solar energies, and through decarbonization, we would like to revitalize the area. Furthermore, with the agricultural sector, renewable energy switching is what we would like to achieve, especially. And we have a lot of fisheries industry with seaweeds. There are many people engaged in fishery. However, because we dependent on the fossil fuel, we are affected by the global market. Therefore, we like to introduce renewable energy so that greenhouse gas emission can be reduced, and also we can maintain employment and give additional values to fisheries businesses. Currently, we should be on the third slide, and there are various challenges that we face and opportunities. We have plenty of sunlight, and we have 16.8 hectares of unused land. With solar energy, we are selling electricity, and from the profit, we would like to achieve various solutions to the issues so that the outcome can be paid back to the society by reducing the profit back to the society, and we would like to make the best use of the nature. We'd like to create the opportunities for employment and give the benefit back to the society. The natural environment is there, and by greening the areas, we like to achieve CO2 absorption. The greening will be participated by the citizens. We expect their livelihood to improve in the society. One of the issues we see is that the young people in local cities, after they graduate from high schools, they go to urban areas for further education or for employment. And our solution would be that we have a joint effort of education ecosystem with Tohoku University, so that we'll have an opportunity to create opportunities for young people and educate them. Now, for elementary school children, we have been conducting the diaries, the picture diaries program, which is put together as a calendar and distributed to the citizens. Also, together with stakeholders, with junior high school and high school children, we have developed a joint program and considerations for the environment. We would like children to have consideration for environment and have awareness. By doing so, we'll make contribution for the society. The local revitalization in ESG, we would like to work on both axes so that in 2030 in the Bill area we'll have the regional circulatory cohabitation area so that we can be an independent area. And without waiting for 2050, 3 prefectures that has been suffered the earthquake will try to achieve the circulative society. Now, we will make the best use of the areas after relocation, and also we will utilize the roofs of the new homes. The solar power generation will be achieved, as you find on the bottom, 885 kilowatt hour. Generation will be achieved, so that will be zero emission by 2030. Approximately 2.7-fold increase is expected. If you move to slide 5. This is for the commercial area. The slide shows the activities we have in the commercial area. Moving on to the 6th slide. This shows our schedule. The first part is for the installation of new power generation, eco-education, and microgrid structuring will be our objective for the second part. This for the promotion, if you Eneru is company limited is a new business we have initiated to aim at decarbonization. We are working on this, and we'll have communication with the people. Creative recovery and SDGs had been our goal, and at Nobiru area, we have jointly promoted the creation of the cities, and Hope's been in business for 10 years, and they have engaged in important activities, Higashimatsuyama Mirai Toshi Institute in project management, and they are engaging in public works. It's been 11 years since the earthquake, and the areas have a very low population, and the reduction in population is something we cannot avoid. We understand that, but even in this situation, we are engaging in the decarbonization and revitalization of the area, so that we will be able to create new local areas. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today, and I'd like to express my deepest appreciation to all for all the supports we have received after the earthquake. Thank you very much, and this concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Otsuki. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Tomoaki Yoshida. He's the Assistant Director in the Energy Policy Planning section for the City of Kyoto. Now, of course, the City of Kyoto is the birthplace of the Kyoto Protocol and has become synonymous with global climate action. It must be very proud to bear this name and to bear this this honor. And now you've been selected also as the Ministry of the, now you've been selected by the Ministry of the Environment as one of the 100 decarbonized leading areas. So, Mr. Yoshida, can you explain to us the background of Kyoto's journey toward this honor and how you're going to carry forward with your climate change initiatives?
Thank you very much. I am from Kyoto City, and thank you very much for this very precious opportunity. So yes, I will be talking about local decarbonization efforts carried out in Kyoto. I hope you can see the screen. So let me go into my presentation. So towards 2050, Kyoto's challenge towards net zero, we are aiming to become a zero carbon ancient capital model. So looking at what Kyoto City has been doing to tackle global warming. So as was mentioned in 1997, COP3 was held in Kyoto, where the Kyoto Protocol was established. So that's the starting point of all our efforts. And in Kyoto, after the adoption of Kyoto Protocol, we tried to lead the way, and therefore, with the citizens, businesses, and also local stakeholders, we tried to carry out global warming countermeasures. And so in 2004, we enacted the Kyoto City Ordinance on Global Warming Countermeasures. This was the first global warming ordinance in Japan. And after that, many cities followed the example of Kyoto to set up their own ordinances. And towards 2050, we want zero CO2 emission. We want to be carbon neutral. And so we are trying to decarbonize ourselves. And so in 2020, we amended our ordinance. And now we have a new Kyoto City Global Warming Countermeasure Plan. And this year, we have initiatives. Excuse me, this is last year. Last year, we were selected as the decarbonization leading areas, and we will now carry out measures related to this. So looking at what has happened in the past, left-hand bottom, the introduction of renewable power generation over 10 years, it has increased 5.5 times, especially solar power generation has the greatest potential, and this has grown by nearly 13 times. And right-hand bottom, the citizens' dedication, we can see that waste has been reduced from its peak by half. Now, our city's plan on global warming countermeasures. So we have some mitigation measures and also adaptation measures. We have measures on two sides. For the mitigation side, there are 4 areas we are focusing on. Left-hand top, the focus of today, energy. And bottom, lifestyle changes of each individual citizen. Right-hand top, the business activities and promoting measures there. And then right-hand bottom, EV and other next-generation vehicles, mobility. So these are the 4 areas where we are having our focus. Especially for energy, solar power generation equipments have been spread, and 20,000 tons CO2 has to be reduced by 2030. And towards this, we are introducing more solar power equipments. 250 megawatts is the goal now. Right now, it's 136 megawatts. Therefore, we have to double the amount of solar power equipments. So we have to look at both the demand side as well as the supply side in taking our measures, and some unique features of our initiatives. So when new buildings are built or are added, these are some regulations. And from 2012, we have started this effort. And I think this is quite unique, not seen in other cities. So for buildings larger than 2,000 square meters, they are mandated to establish renewable energy installations. Also for mid-scale buildings, they are also asked at least 60,000 megajoules and certain megajoules are applied for each scale of buildings. And toward the bottom, as you can see here, so for solar power generation, we carried out a survey, and therefore nowadays we are asking the architects to make proposals concerning introduction of renewable energy, because it seems that when architects talk to the building owners, they may be more active in setting up these renewable energy sources, and therefore we are asking, or we have made explaining this possibility mandatory to the architects. Now, as was mentioned, the local decarbonization area. In addition to this, we have energy use and sharing of infrastructure. So we are now shifting towards this collaboration. And that is part of our local decarbonization area initiative. And just a little bit to give you an example. So we want to decarbonize Kyoto people's lifestyles. And in the Fushimi region, we have measures being taken in the cultural heritage areas as well as shopping street areas. So there are a lot of temples as well as shopping streets. And since COP3 was held here, there are many environment-related facilities also. So we wanted our cultural heritages also to be decarbonized, as well as the shopping streets decarbonized. So some unique initiatives. So since Kyoto has a lot of temples and cultural assets, for example, Fushimi Inari Taisha Shrine and the head temple of Daigoji Temple, we want to make sure that we do not ruin the landscape, but also make sure that we have renewable energy generation equipment installed, as well as storage batteries installed. And we are trying to switch 100% to renewable energy for these facilities as well. And for the shopping district, this is where people gather. Just like the cultural assets, we now have set up solar arcades as well as storage batteries. And I'm very sorry, I know I'm running out of time, so this is my last slide. So stable renewable energy supply. We want to set up a system to make this possible. In the middle, you see a Buddhist priest, but since Kyoto has a power supply and production company that has been built by Buddhist priests, therefore we will also utilize such efforts, and we want to roll this out so that we can decarbonize the city, and also we can vitalize the local economy and create a regional economic circulation. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yoshida. Once again, a very forward-looking and optimistic presentation. And now we're going to come back to Europe with Mr. Ivan Ivankovic. He's the head of environmental sustainability in the city of Zagreb, Croatia. So I know well the problem of energy prices here in Europe, here in Belgium. They've been very high. So I'm looking forward to hear how things are going in Croatia. Mr. Ivankovic, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Terry, and good morning, everyone, or good afternoon for our colleagues in Japan. Here is let's say, my brief overview of the current situation here in the city of Zagreb with regards to energy prices. So, okay, much better. So energy prices, near and long-term outlook in the time of severe uncertainty. What I wanted to give you an overview of how the city is coping with the stress of the last few years, especially the last a year and a half, basically, since the inflation surge started. So a brief overview of some key energy stats. So the city of Zagreb is the capital of the Republic of Croatia. We entered the Eurozone and Schengen area on January 1st of this year. So Zagreb is the capital of Croatia with close to 800,000 inhabitants just for the city of Zagreb administrative area, but over 1 million when you count the surrounding agglomeration which gravitates towards the city. Zagreb is 20% of the country's population and 1/3 of the economy. It's close to 640 square kilometers in space. And as you can see, both in primary energy consumption and final energy consumption, basically natural gas is the dominant energy currently used, because it has a long history here in the city of Zagreb, all the way back from 1862, so 19th century. I think this slide, the way I structured it, will basically illustrate our predicament, so to say. So let's compare basically the energy prices of the two periods that were recently completed. So city of Zagreb and its associated city-owned entities, so municipal companies, schools, hospitals, etc., usually procure prices through a public procurement process, with around 420 gigawatt hours of natural gas on a 2-year period and close to 500 gigawatt hours of electricity. And as you can see here, basically the electricity price for the period of 2020-2022 was okay. I mean, we projected 51 million euros. We got a winning bid of 31 million, so nice savings. Natural gas was also within our projections. So just to show you the order of magnitude of how much the city pays on a 2-year basis for basically all of its operations, so to say, you can see the numbers in plain sight here. And then what happened after the surge is the current contract expired sometime in summer of last year. And the projection for the electricity price was that it was going to basically double. And the winning bid was actually canceled because of the government's price cap, which I will show on the next slide. And the natural gas procurement went on, as you can see, on a much larger scope for basically the same amount of energy. So the city budget and associated companies' budgets was severely squeezed in this era that we are now in, because of the overall stress of the inflationary shock within Europe. What has happened is that the central government actually in September announced for Croatia a huge basically fiscal boost in terms of keeping the prices low and setting a price cap. So from October 1st all the way to March of this year, households will pay a fixed price for electricity and natural gas, basically. And the public sector, which includes administrative buildings of local and regional administration, i.e. City of Zagreb and its companies, basically has a price cap of 62 euros per megawatt hour. The government also capped the prices of petroleum products, which are adjusted on every 2-week level, which of course impacts our transport schedules here in the city of Zagreb with regards to the buses and garbage collection vehicles and etc. So with the overall scheme of the EU countries, basically Croatia is on the upper, let's say, percentile of countries that have both as a percentage of GDP and allocated funding with regards to the energy crisis. So Croatia basically earmarked, I think, 4.5% of its GDP to combat the energy prices as best as we as a country can. Of course, in the allocated funding era, it's a lot less than, for example, Germany or much richer European neighbors. With regards to that, we have an overall program which will basically come online sort of this year. It's the Zagreb's Energy Poverty Mitigation Program, which was originally conceived basically as a multi-year process for alleviating the upcoming European emission trading system 2, which is carbon tax on fossil fuel use in heating and transport, which will of course come online by the end of the decade, since negotiations have finalized in last month in Brussels. But basically, we looked at that as a trigger in terms of, hey, we as a city need to prepare for the onset of the upcoming regulatory issues with regards to carbon taxing fossil fuel use in heating and transport, which you saw in the city of Zagreb is predominantly natural gas based. But of course, since the crisis, basically a bulk of the program pivoted to a more near-term local fiscal transfers. How successful we will be, we'll see. But this is an example of a quick turnaround given the circumstances that were not present when the program was originally conceived. And basically this year, we call it the preparatory year. And the idea here is to map basically all the vulnerable households and future program users, while direct fiscal transfers would then start in the fiscal year 2024 across a range of measures. So from information and consulting to what we call energy baskets, so a certain package where a vulnerable family gets various sorts of devices and assistance for their household, to more fiscally demanding, of course, programs such as supporting energy refurbishment of homes and buildings for the most vulnerable households, supporting the deployment of renewable energy sources on those dwellings. And of course, a big push will be, let's say, on the developmental side, is the development of a new tranche of social housing here in the city of Zagreb, because social housing as a category in Europe is in some member states is very well developed. In Croatia, it's not that much. So we want to push that as one of the long-term solutions for housing crisis, i.e. energy crisis. So in a nutshell, in these 8 minutes, that would be this. My final thought is that you can't really plan in these times that well, because the biggest challenge is how to combine the green transition needs and huge investments with the near-term immense needs of the citizens and everyone impacted by the crisis. So it's a delicate balancing act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ivankovic. And that heads us very well into our next presentation from the city of Warsaw. Jacek Kisiel is the Deputy Director in Air Protection and Climate Policy Department for Warsaw. And of course, Poland is really bearing a huge load from the war in Ukraine, not just with the energy structure, of course, but we are very interested in hearing how you are adapting to meet both the energy crisis and the other weight on your country. Mr. Kisiel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Energy safety is a really very important issue now in Poland. It's of course due to the invasion or aggression of Russia on Ukraine. So in Poland, we are thinking about that for many years, our country import Russian oil, Russian natural gas or Russian coal, and we paid a lot of money to the regime. So that makes us a kind of sponsor of that war, and that thought makes Polish people really sick. But it also makes us another consideration in general. Is it good for the energy security reason to import fossil fuels from other countries and to be dependent on other countries? And from that perspective, people in Poland think that the most important thing is to be energy independent. And that brings us to renewables as a solution to be independent country in the energy sector. And talking about renewables brings me to my presentation. And it is how Warsaw combines air quality and climate action with tackling energy poverty. And it's also very connected with renewables. So let me start with the electricity production in Poland. We saw how it is in Croatia, for example. It's quite different in Poland because our electricity production in Poland is based on coal. 70% is based on coal. So we are very coal addicted country. And the same is true when we are talking about heating energy, because it's also based on coal. In Poland, we have about more than 3 million individual homes which uses old inefficient coal boilers as a source of heating. And that means the result of it is very bad air quality in Poland. As you see on that map, excuse me, yeah. Do you see my presentation?
We do.
Okay, so maybe next slide, please. Okay, and so Poland has a huge problem with air quality, and this is a huge challenge. We have to replace all the 3 million coal boilers, and that great old inefficient coal boilers in, or you can change into heat pumps are the solutions. So sorry, so next slide, please. Okay, so as you see on that picture, sales of heat pumps in Poland is growing rapidly. So last year, for example, we sold 200,000 heat pumps in Poland. So that makes the heat pumps market rapidly growing in Poland. Maybe it's one of the quickest developing market in all Europe. And this is the way we follow in Warsaw. So next slide, please. So in Warsaw, we started a Warsaw anti-smoke program. So we started it in 2017. 2017 is very important year because in 2017, we had 2 or 3 days with really big smoke alerts in Warsaw. And the Warsaw is the headquarters of national white media and politics. And politics noticed that smoke is a huge problem, very important problem in Poland. So in 2017, the regional authorities banned the use of inefficient solid fuel boilers in Warsaw from 1st January of 2023. And in 2017, Warsaw introduced its own subsidy scheme for the replacement of inefficient boilers. And we had almost 15,000 coal boilers in Warsaw at that time. So we have 6 years to replace all 15,000 inefficient coal boilers in Warsaw. But what is very important that in 2019, we introduced priority subsidies for heat pumps together with photovoltaics. It's because the heat pump consumes electricity, and electricity in Poland is very emissive. So you need a photovoltaic installation to produce the renewable energy to balance the whole installation and makes that installation carbon-free. So between 2017 and 2022, we replaced more than 5,000 coal boilers in Warsaw. Mainly replaced it with we replaced it with photovoltaics and heat pumps, and that brings me to another slide. Could you? Yeah, and as you see, air quality in Warsaw improved. So as you see in 2017. The result on air quality station we exceeded the acceptable norms, but now in 2022, all results are within acceptable norms. But we still have 5,000 coal boilers. And that brings me to another question about energy poverty, because in these 5,000, there are many peoples who are in energy poverty. And we need to give them another offer for those people, because they are looking for energy bills. So we have to give them an offer which lower their energy bills, which is very important now. So could you pass me to the next slide? Oh, thank you very much. So if you use coal boilers, the annual cost of energy is more than 2,000 euro. If you replace the coal boilers with heat pumps and retrofit your buildings and add PV installation, that will lower your energy bills more than 5 times to 400 euros. So that, next slide, please. We introduced a new pilot program last year. It's called Stop Smoke Program. It is dedicated to low-income residents. The heaters will be exchanged with retrofitting, and it's co-financed by the government and local government. And the reduction of heat energy demands is by at least 30%. So in that action, we combine air quality and climate action with tackling energy poverty. And my last remark, it's about the future. Because we, as a Warsaw, are a member of EU mission 100 cities climate neutral by 2030. And the aim of that mission is to find a new innovative way to become climate neutral. And this new innovative way, in my opinion, could be a new service for the city. And that new service for citizens will be selling or transferring renewable energy for vulnerable groups of people. So cities should produce renewable energy, then storage it, then making a renewable energy agency which transfer the renewable energy for low-income people at a stable and affordable price. I think that's the future, how you can combine air quality, climate, and social issue, and that helps us to become climate neutral. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kisiel. And now I'm very happy to welcome all 4 of our speakers back onto the screen here. And we are going to have a bit of a discussion. And I thought I would go straight back to you, Mr. Kisiel, because you brought this up in your presentation about working with other countries. You said that Poland is now much more wary about being dependent on other countries for your energy needs. So what kind of cooperation, what is the future cooperation that you would envision between cities and their national governments, but also international partners?
Well, I think that on the international level, what we are needing is to, and I think there is a kind of all agreement in Poland that we should add some nuclear energy in Poland. So we started as a country, some nuclear energy investments, but we also in a city are looking for some solution to add some nuclear energy, I mean small nuclear, modular nuclear, SMRs, to add to our energy mix, just to combine renewable energy. Renewable energy is our priority, but we must somehow combine it with some stable and zero carbon technologies. And I think that SMRs are something which we think that we want to collaborate with other countries and with other cities.
And is that the same case for Croatia, Mr. Ivankovic? Do you see your mix, the need for your new mix of energy supplies much the same as Poland, even though of course you're further away from the current conflict that's driving so many of these problems right now?
Not that far away, but yeah,
not
Croatia,
far enough.
Yeah. the colleague from Warsaw identified basically the main issues for all Central European countries, which is how to increase energy resilience and security supply and wean ourselves off the Russian basically energy imports, which I think Europe as a whole proved really quickly and really effectively that it can do. It's just a matter of filling all those gaps that will be present as time goes on. Croatia has immense renewable energy potential. We are a country with great insulation, so solar PV potential is amazing. We also are on the edge of the so-called Pannonian Basin, which is a great geothermal resource. So Croatia as a country, I will now put the Croatian hat on, not the city of Zagreb only, has great potential to basically develop immense geothermal potential, which is of course stable baseload energy source both for heating and electricity production. But of course, wind energy, especially near the Adriatic coast. And when you look at the country as a whole, we are very well interconnected with all the neighboring countries with regards to electricity and of course, currently natural gas trading. We have an LNG terminal in operation on the island of Krk, which has proved immensely good in the current crisis and switching the basically natural gas imports away from Russia. But more long term, of course, renewable energy is the key for Croatia's energy security and stability. I would like to mention that Croatia is a part owner of the Krško nuclear power plant, which is 50 kilometers here from Zagreb in Slovenia. And talks are underway of a new block that will be maybe constructed in the next couple of years. But long term, again, especially for the city of Zagreb, which doesn't have that much renewable energy potential, the goal is rooftop solar, number one. So basically utilize all these roofs you can see behind me are basically the sites that can produce energy for that particular building and household. And then the city of Zagreb itself is on the edge of that Pannonian Basin for geothermal, not for electricity, but for heat production. So the goal is basically to diversify energy and build more renewables as much as we can within the REPowerEU framework. And here in the city of Zagreb, we take that very, very seriously and hope that even though the crisis is going, the interest rates are surging, the financing for renewables, for the Green Deal activities will be available in the future also. And that investors and everyone will see the difference between long-term stable renewable energy source investments versus something else which is either more risky or more not very well suited for a city of Zagreb size.
Well, certainly some lucky geography, or rather geology, there for you with the geothermal resources. But I'd like to ask our Japanese participants the same question. Of course, nuclear power, of which Mr. Kisiel spoke so highly and optimistically, may not be seen the same way in Japan. So Mr. Yoshida, Mr. Otsuki, what do Japanese cities see as the best manner of cooperation, both with national authorities and with international partners for securing energy stability and resilience in the face of future risks? Whichever one of you would like to go first. Mr. Otsuki, why don't you start?
Well, thank you very much for the question. Now, the utilization of renewable energy is indeed very important. Currently, there are advantages and disadvantages, but we are hoping that there will be more technological advancement. The other day, we had an opportunity to speak directly with our citizens. They are all interested in batteries for the household consumption. They are very much interested in it. That's all I can say now. So in Kyoto as well, especially I think in Japan, the energy prices are soaring, and restart operations of some nuclear power plants are happening. Kyoto City, we are against restarting the nuclear power plants. However, for our livelihoods, we are considering what best we should do. Therefore, maximum use of renewables is one way. And I may be repeating myself, but introducing renewables and also local production and local consumption of energy. So the decarbonization leading area initiative is one of the things that Kyoto City is doing.
If I could just have a quick lightning round with each of you in just the couple minutes we have left for the discussion, I would like each of you to tell me what you believe the most important task is for your city right now to become resilient against risks that we don't yet know, natural disasters, wars we didn't expect. What is the number one focus that you are looking at right now for your cities? And I will go in the order that you spoke. So I would start with Mr. Otsuki.
Well, for the local governments have limited budgets, and we do have limited personnel who are experts of energy issues. Now that's the situation. For the local energy, in order for us to engage in strategies, we need the support of national governments and international parties, including EU. We would like to have your advice and good information. That's what we are looking for.
Okay, so cooperation, coordination, sharing of best practices. That's for Higashi Matsushima City. Mr. Yoshida, for Kyoto, your number one goal to be proactive against future risks.
Well, Kyoto City, from the past, we have a history of 1,200 years, and there are a lot of cultural assets that have been built in this area, and the culture is deeply rooted in the local area. So these local symbols, as well as the landscape, the townscape, we want to make sure that it lasts for hundreds of years ahead, and we want to focus on that. And I think it's energy that is decarbonized energy, and maximizing the use of renewables and local production and consumption of energy may be the key.
So preservation of the past as well as innovation for the future. Very interesting, especially with a city with a history like Kyoto. Mr. Ivankovic, for Zagreb, what is the number one thing you think about for preparing for things we don't yet know are going to make things difficult?
To sum it up in one sentence, it would basically be really, and I mean really, embedding energy and climate policy in all aspects of local government and administration, from budgeting to decision making to everything. So when we do roads, when we do power lines, when we do, I mean, everything that the city does needs to have that forward thinking with regards to crisis, with regards to, environmental, climate, whatever, embedding resilience within the overall process of city planning. A lot of people talk about it, but not much is actually being done on the field because of costs, because of coordinations, because of, like the colleague from Japan said, various departments doing their own thing. It needs to be, I wouldn't say centralized, but more of a zeitgeist, more of a a way of thinking change, that hey, this is important, this needs to be done, similar as to how we have building codes and standards for construction and everything. We need to have resilience as an umbrella term, of course, that encapsulates all the aspects of both climate and hazards and environmental hazards embedded in the overall process of infrastructure development and city planning and everything that the city does. Because like the colleague Otsuki said, cities by design have limited scope and oversight and mandate. Basically much of that is happening on the national level, of course, but cities and regions need to have the power to embed resilience as an overarching term in their planning and implementation of basically everything they're doing. And that's the key. That's the only way we'll basically survive in the future, is to things we build now have to withstand the next 50 plus years of increasing climate hazards, not to mention environmental hazards and like you said, Terry, things we can't even imagine will happen, pandemics, etc. So embedding resilience in our thinking is key.
Well, if the combination of threats that the world is now throwing at cities doesn't focus the mind, I'm not sure what will. But then again, we can't imagine those things. So very interesting. And finally, Mr. Kisio from Warsaw, what's your #1 goal to be as proactive as possible?
I think that the best way of reducing emission is not to waste the energy. So I think the #1 challenge for Warsaw will be retrofitting of our buildings, because EU regulation says that 2 or maybe 3% buildings in the city should be retrofitted every year. And that's the huge challenge. But I think that the most important challenge, especially in Warsaw, when we have a lot of building which needs to be retrofitted now, not in the future, now. So that's the #1 challenge in Warsaw.
Very expensive in the short term, but like you say, so important in the long term. Well, thank you very much to my 4 speakers. This was so interesting and dynamic. I learned a lot, and we have more than 150 people joining us online who I'm sure got a lot out of it as well. So thank you very much to our first panel today. And now we're going to move on to our next speaker and something completely different. We're going to hear from Ms. Annika Dahlén. She's the Gender Equality and Strategic Development Officer for the city of Umeå, Sweden. Ms. Dahlén has been active in gender equality and human rights both in Sweden and in Latin America. And she's going to talk about gender aspects in climate action and urban planning. And I have to confess, this is something that I personally haven't thought much about, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing about it. Ms. Dahlén, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'll just share my presentation. I hope you can all see it now. And I'll move here. So good morning to those listening in from Europe, and good afternoon to those participating from Japan. And thank you very much for this invitation to talk about our work in Umeå. And as was already presented, my name is Annika Dahlén, and I work as a gender equality strategist for the city of Umeå in Sweden. And what I will talk about today is our work in Umeå towards carbon neutrality, and how we see an intimate connection between this work and our work with social sustainability in general and gender equality in particular. So just to kind of set the stage, Umeå is a growing city with a population that has doubled since the 1960s. And we're currently just over 130,000 residents, but we have high ambitions for continuous growth, with the vision of becoming 200,000 residents by the year 2050. And this vision for growth explicitly states that the growth shall be reached with maintained social, environmental, economic, and cultural sustainability. So all these dimensions of sustainability cannot be understood as separate from each other. And when we talk about social sustainability, for us, gender equality is a fundamental part of that. And through the National Strategic Innovation Program, Viable Cities, Umeå is one of 9 Swedish cities that have signed the first climate city contracts with the Swedish government. And Umeå was also last year chosen as one of 100 European cities aiming for the EU mission on climate neutrality by 2030. And both of these initiatives follow the same methodology: by and for the citizens, not by and for just some of the citizens. So here it is necessary to integrate an understanding of gender inequality as a central part of the work, because we need to constantly ask the question of who is planning and who is being planned, and build that understanding into our strategies and plans, including our action plans for reaching climate neutrality. Because gender equality needs to be achieved in tandem with climate neutrality. And it's also more than that. Without an understanding of gendered power structures, norms, identity, and how that connects to behavior, I would even dare to say that we will not become a climate neutral city if we don't understand that. So Umeå is a city that for more than 30 years has strived for gender equality. And the method that we work with, we call it the gendered landscape. And it's a method that we use when we plan, build, and think about our city, from the political level to the everyday work in the public services. And it is about integrating an understanding of gendered power structures and life conditions for women and men into all the work that the municipality does. And we do that through gender segregated data, surveys, analysis, and not least, of course, a dialogue, trying our very best to understand the different life conditions of the inhabitants of the city so that we can create better services and hopefully plan and build a city that creates conditions for women and men to have equal power to shape society as well as their own lives. And in the rest of this presentation, I want to highlight some examples of a critical perspective on gender, power, and norms in work with smart and sustainable cities. And I might not provide many answers, but most of all, I'll try to give you examples of the critical questions that we need to ask ourselves in these processes. So when we work with gender equality, we always stress the importance of gender segregated data to really understand life conditions for women and men. Otherwise, there's a real risk that we might create one-size-fits-all solutions based on assumptions that do not take differences into account. So one example on how to use gender segregated data to work towards a smart and sustainable city with a gender perspective is our travel habit survey. So our most recent data from October 2022 shows that the share of car travel for men in the municipality is 45%, whereas it's only 34% for women. And given that mobility in our city generates almost half of the total emissions from private households, this is a key area to work on. And what this data tells us is that if men would travel like women, the car travel would go down 6 points from 40%, which is the overall average, to 34%. So the policy implication of this knowledge is the discussion that men need to travel like women. Why don't they? So we worked with things like identity connected to the car and targeting male-dominated workplaces in mobility management. And it's also a discussion on which investment is better for the environment, investing in more electric buses or getting more men to take the bus. And of course, it's getting men to take the bus, but the integrated understanding targets both of these at the same time. We've also done a local consumer habit survey. And as far as we know, we're the only municipality in Sweden so far. And we think it's a good example of not only seeing gendered patterns in what we consume, but also asking, for example, questions like, who does the grocery shopping in the household? And it turns out that a much higher number of men than women answer that they think it's an equal share. And highlighting how our perceptions on the responsibility for the unpaid housework differ is an example of integrating gender equality perspective into a survey that had an environmental starting point. And it means understanding that we need to work also with how we perceive our own behavior and what kind of interventions are needed based on that. And this also connects to issues like the sharing economy. What are women and men ready to share and want to share, to who and how, and making sure that taking part in the sharing economy feels safe, especially for women, Because we also know through surveys and dialogue that 79% of people in Umeå are very worried about climate change, and women to a higher degree than men. And more women are also of the opinion that the work has barely started. So that when we create platforms and solutions for a more sustainable way of living, we must be gender sensitive. Another concrete example is our municipal energy company that made an analysis on solar panels, showing that certain groups were missing from buying and placing solar panels on their houses. So they looked at what are the groups that they didn't reach. And it turned out that women in general was one group. So then they decided to start renting out solar panels as an option, thus decreasing the financial burden and also offering support to those who rented them. So meaning that you don't have to be a technical expert to put solar panels on your house, which turned out that it opened up that offer to a wider range of people. And my final example is that the future of sustainable mobility, of course, includes electric vehicles. They're already here, and the fleet is growing every day. And this means a need for a whole new charging infrastructure. And here it is really important to stop for a moment and ask some critical questions on who do we assume to be the user of an electric car? Where should you be able to charge your electric car? Will there be a charging infrastructure available close to schools and preschools to facilitate for those who are dropping off and picking up their children to fast charge their cars? What about female-dominated and male-dominated workplaces? Because this is expensive, and once it's installed, pretty static infrastructure. So it's important that we make sure not to build in inequality into this infrastructure and ask ourselves, whose lives are we facilitating depending on how we plan the infrastructure? So just to sum up this really quick overview, a holistic understanding of sustainability is a guiding principle for all strategic development in Umeå, where gender equality is understood as a fundamental component of sustainability. And gender equality work needs to be globally understood and locally contextualized. And working actively with gender equality, quantitative and qualitative, is a good investment because it makes us have a critical eye, it opens up processes, creates innovation, and it can also save a lot of money and time by making interventions specific and efficient. But it cannot be an afterthought or an add-on. It needs to be there from the start. And we have an organization that has trained itself in seeing that behavioral change, it's not easy, and it's connected to power, social norms, identity, and to highlight this and to work with this is just as important as introducing new technology in order to reach climate neutrality. And that's all for me. Thank you very much once again for this invitation to this really important seminar.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dahlin. And you can see that I'm smiling. It's not because anything you said was funny, but my screen is flooded with hearts, thumbs up, clapping hands. I mean, they're just coming and coming. So what you are saying is definitely resonating with our audience here, with me personally, and they're still coming.
I'm really glad to hear that. And I'm happy to connect to cities. We're always open to networking with cities and working together with other cities to take further steps and move forward. So I'm happy to connect.
That's wonderful.
The participants here.
We should remind everybody that presentations will be posted. So I yes. presume that your contact details will be
My contact details is on the first and on the last slide. So feel free to reach out. Thank you very much.
I have the luxury of about another minute and a half before I hand it back over to Mr. Mori. If I could just ask you a question, though.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
This comes up many times when we, I lived in Scandinavia a long time, so I can say with experience, many people will say, yes, but what you can do in Scandinavia cannot be replicated in other places, because Scandinavia has such an egalitarian society, people perhaps more interested, more used to hearing about the need for gender equality. Can what you are learning be transferred to other countries, to other continents? I'm sure our Japanese viewers would be interested in hearing. Are you also looking at how to make this adaptable for cultures that don't share perhaps a lot of the same fundamental habits, if not values, with Swedish society?
Yes, absolutely. And I really think it is replicable, but I think it's also really important to keep in mind that there is no like one size fits all solution. Like really the important thing is to understand the local context and base the solutions on that. So for example, when it comes to energy, we work a lot with mobility because that's the big source of emissions for us. And there we focus on working with these issues. But also when it comes to working with gender equality, I think that there's no one size fits all solution, but I think that one thing or two things that are kind of one size fits all is that you really need gender segregated data, because if you don't understand the different conditions that different groups have, like what does the labor market look like, where are the workplaces, how do people travel, what do people do with their time, and what does that mean for what they can, what will a particular incentive, how will that affect the lives of different groups, like those kinds of things. That's the basis for really doing precise interventions. So gender segregated data, and also just ask some critical questions. When you see assumptions, maybe just ask 2 or 3 critical questions. Try to turn exclamation marks into question marks. And yeah, keep in mind that behavior is also, we can't just install technology. We also need to think about the different groups of people that will use it.
I think that goes back to Mr. Ivankovic's saying that you just need to adapt a whole new way of thinking from the bottom up in order to be resilient, adaptive societies. So thank you very much. This was fascinating, and as we see, very, very well received. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. We're happy to have had you. Still some flowers flying up on our
Great.
Thank you. And now on that very happy note, I will hand this over to Mr. Mori. You're still getting some flowers and hearts there, Mr. Mori.
Thank you for me. Right. Thank you very much for all speakers and Terry. It's very exciting presentations and discussion. So we will have about 15 minutes break from now. And the next session will start Central European Time, 11:10 a.m. or Japan Standard Time, 7:10 p.m. So I hope all of you just come back by this in time. So we have a break from now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed break. Okay, let us start the session, panel 2. All right, so Terry, could you start the panel, please?
Absolutely, thank you very much, Mr. Mori. So we are going to move on to our panel about local decarbonization contributing to local economies. We're going to be looking at how local governments are able to facilitate energy transition while also growing their economies. We've talked a little bit about that earlier in today's sessions, about the challenges of economic pressures with keeping your commitments to climate change technologies and sustainability practices. So now we are going to hear directly from some of the practitioners on how they're managing to do this. They're going to talk about how policies, governance systems, partnerships, and regulatory systems can be used to help convince stakeholders to accept these changes. And I think this is going to be something that is going to be very interesting for everyone needing to still make these changes in the future. Our first speaker is Mr. Mitsugi Takanaka. He's the mayor of Kashimahoro Town, and he is going to talk to us about what his city does on sustainability. It has been widely recognized with numerous awards for innovations. So I think that he's a great person to start us off on this panel. So Mr. Takanaka, please help share with us some of your city's rewarded practices and what the rest of us can learn from them. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I am from Hokkaido Prefecture. I'm the mayor of Kamishihoro Town, and I would like to talk about our initiatives related to SDGs and what we have been doing to create a sustainable town. So this is the outline of our town. It is in the middle of Hokkaido. It's about 700 square kilometers, where about 5,000 people live, but we have 47,000 heads of cattle, and it is a dairy town, and our food self-sufficiency rate is 3,500%, and raw milk production per year is 137,000 tons. So this is enough to provide 1 liter of milk to all the 125 million population of Japan. And we also have a biogas power generation facility. And the self-sufficiency rate is 100%. So we have local production and consumption of renewable energy. So looking at economic, social, and environmental initiatives, in the economy side, we want people to come in from the cities to our town so that it creates new businesses. And like the biogas plant, we want to create new jobs. And the zero carbon initiatives, we want to make sure that they take root within the town. And we want to make sure that it creates a virtuous cycle within our town. For society, using drones and autonomous driving vehicles, social implementation of these new technologies to increase the convenience of citizens' lives. And on the environment side, we want to seek carbon neutrality, but we also want to make sure that we are resilient against disasters. Next, looking at some specific initiatives. First is the use of cattle manure for a local production and consumption of energy and resource circulation. So methane is utilized from livestock manure for biogas power generation, and the electricity created here will be utilized within the town through an electricity company, and also the manure material also will be utilized as fertilizers, and we also recycle the bedding materials. So we have this resource recycling agriculture here. Now, the solar power generation for zero CO2, we need to make sure that houses as well as offices and factories implement solar power generation. So we do have a support system for the introduction of these equipments. Next, on transportation and distribution. So we had a bus system that runs at a fixed schedule on a fixed route. But now we want to change this to on-demand operation. And with this, we increase the running of the bus, and we have a pick-up and drop-off at the house doorstep. And also we have a simple reservation system, which is elderly friendly. And the operation ratio of the bus went down. However, the number of users increased by 2.4 times. So we are increasing convenience while we are reducing CO2 emissions. Next is the autonomous driving bus service. From 2017, we have started this demonstration, and there were several issues along the way, but by verifying the issues starting December last year, we now have a regular bus running within the town. So we now have a lack of bus drivers, but we need to have transportation, and therefore we want to utilize this autonomous driving bus. So next is the use of drones for delivery services. Just like transportation, for logistics in the local area, that has been a major issue for us. And in Kamishihoro town, alongside truck deliveries, we have started to combine this with drone deliveries to optimize the local logistics system. With this, we are able to reduce manpower, but also reduce CO2 emissions. Next, we want to make sure that people can change behaviors while enjoying themselves. So the SDGs principle is being taught to the citizens, and from little children to elderly people, as well as businesses, we are trying to spread what the SDGs is all about, especially in elementary school. Every year, there is a 30-hour course to teach SDGs. And we are trying to teach the next generation, and we are hoping that they will be active citizens in the future. And also, the youth in the town has started up a project team to start behavioral changes while enjoying themselves. So for environmentally friendly activities, points will be allocated, and this will be utilized as a local currency in the town. And this is my last slide. So using renewable energy and saving energy by saving energies, and also trying to make transportation and distribution services more efficient to promote behavioral changes among citizens and businesses. We want to make sure that environmental measures could be a growth engine for economy while we try to decarbonize the whole town. It is a small town, however, we want to make sure that we can become a model for the whole of Japan as well as the world. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Mr. Takanaka, I am so impressed. It's very easy to see why you have won awards for implementation of the SDGs. And I think that we can all take a lot away from your presentation, since we've been talking about how to change mindsets and how to embed this thinking about climate protection and decarbonization from early ages. That was really, really interesting. As the mother of 2 kids too, I wish my kids had access to a program like that. So thank you very much for that fascinating presentation. Our next speaker is Mr. Tomomichi Takahashi. He's the Special Director of Policymaking in the Sewage Management Promotion Division of Akita Prefecture. And he is going to talk about how they are using a regional microgrid created by utilizing sewage resources and assets. Mr. Takahashi, the floor is yours.
皆様こんにちは。
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Takahashi from Akita Prefecture, and I would like to talk about the maximization of the potentials the sewage facilities have so that we can create a decarbonization area. What you are seeing on the slide is the sewage facility that I'm going to talk about. It is surrounded by a number of wind power generation plant, and it is in a beautiful scenery. Now, by utilizing this potential to the maximum level, we should be able to have resilience even in natural disaster, and we can reduce energy cost and economy circulation. First of all, I'd like to talk about the good aspects of Akita Prefecture. Our prefecture has a size equivalent to Qatar, where the World Cup Soccer Games was held. Our population is 928,000 people. The pink-colored area, currently we have 360,000 people living here, and the sewage is the wastewater is processed by the Akita Rinkai treatment area, the waterside treatment area. The slide shows the sewage treatment facility that I'm going to talk about. Now, Akita Rinkai wastewater treatment plant. This is the largest wastewater treatment plant in Akita Prefecture currently. On the average, 110,000 cubic meters are processed per day. And as you find in the 44 hectares of land, there's water treatment facility, sludge treatment facility, and incinerator. As you can see from the slide, we cover a huge area. Next, I'd like to talk about the carbon neutrality activities Akita Prefecture is aiming at. Towards 2030 in Akita, we are aiming at a 54% reduction, which is higher than the national goal. Now, within Akita Prefecture, the CO2 emission is the largest from these facilities you find on the right. Akita Rinkai water treatment plant is actually the largest CO2 emitting facility. Now, in order to achieve the very ambitious goal, we need to work on the carbon neutrality to be achieved in one of the largest emitters. Also, we have unique situations in water treatment facility because we release not only CO2 but also methane or N2Os and other GHG gases. We need to be very thorough in reducing these emissions to achieve carbon neutrality. Also, we'd like to achieve the energy independence. Now, about the potentials the wastewater treatment plant has and how to maximize, I'd like to talk about 3 points. First of all, we have a very broad, flat land. Initially, this vast land is available, is what I'd like to talk about. And first of all, we ensured a vast land because we thought wastewater treatment demand will increase, but because of rapid decline in population, we no longer need to use this land for water treatment. That is why we have the land. So the second point, as you know, we are surrounded by wind power generation facilities in Akita. Offshore power generation is very active. Another point is unique to wastewater treatment plant. Biomass continued to flow in 24/7. And in 2020, we started to receive wastewater from the largest wastewater treatment facility in Akita Prefecture. Because of the duct, we can collect all the water, the wastewater. In the initial step for wastewater, organic materials are taken away. As a result, we were hoping to increase the amount of methane production from those organic substances in water. Now, for carbon neutrality, we would like to convert this to energy resource basis. And we also have to think of who to supply this electricity to. In the neighborhood, we have a number of public facilities that consume a lot of energy. In the range of 2.5 kilometers from the site, we have many buildings. We can supply our energy to those facilities. And by achieving this, we would like to make our whole area carbon neutral in a very short time. Here's the overall concept. Left bottom, you find the Akita Rinkai wastewater treatment plant. You will have a photovoltaic plant, wind power plant, biogas power generation plant, so that we can convert everything to carbon neutral facilities and achieve independence, and we'll use our own lines to supply our energy to the facilities, the public facilities, which will consume the energy. This is my last slide. Now, the water treatment plant is in operation 24/7. Biomass will continue to flow in. We have vast land. Also, from the sludge, we can obtain fertilizing substances, and they can be used for other purposes. Therefore, we believe that the treatment plant is a field where we have a lot of possibilities. We have been designated a decarbonization leading area, and we do receive subsidies from the national government to promote our activities. We use energy. The resource is currently procured from outside the area, but in the future, we would like to collect the resources within the region, and by developing the microgrid, at least for this area, we are going to have a very resilient energy supply system procured by ourselves. Also, when it comes to resources and sludge, they can be used for agricultural purposes as well. Through all these various measures, we would like to make our water treatment plant different from the past by having such new values. And this completes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Again, a very inspiring presentation. We're talking a lot about best ways to cooperate with other entities, but it's always also very inspiring to hear about self-sufficiency and about renewing waste into very positive ways. So thank you very much for that presentation. And now we're going to move to Northern Europe, which I actually did myself once upon a time living in Finland. We're going to hear from Mr. Risto Veivo. He's the climate director for the city of Turku. Now, Turku has been recognized for being very bold in innovation, in environmental action. And now Turku says that it wants to be climate neutral by 2029, beating others to that date. So we are very much looking forward, Mr. Veivo, to hearing how Turku intends to do this. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Terry, and it's my great pleasure and honor. Thank you for having me and Turku as a case here. And the organizers have promised to share the slides from their end, as we had some problems with the Microsoft services in Finland actually today. So first slide, please, if possible.
I don't see it yet. Do we? There we go.
It's coming.
Okay.
So thank you so much. So 2029 indeed is our goal, and it's not only in order to be 1 year earlier than other cities in the European 100 cities mission, but actually, next slide, please. Next, please. Actually, in 2029, Turku will be officially 800 years old, and being a carbon neutral area by that year will be our shared gift of the citizens and the city to each other. Turku is a city of culture, creative, maritime, bio and diagnostic industries, and it is among others with these clusters that we aim to reach the goal of carbon neutrality. Next one, please. Thank you. In parallel with the high climate ambition, we are working extensively on sustainable use of natural resources, implementing circular economy, and strengthening biodiversity and taking care of the nature. Next one, please. We are investing 1,235 million euros for carbon neutrality during the next 4-year period in the city group. And so far, we have reduced the greenhouse gas emissions scope 2 by 55% from the level of 1990. And not only have we come down considerably, but our level per person is lower than other big cities in Finland. Next one, please. Thank you so much. Here you can see our emission development scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. We have complemented an energy transition from a completely fossil-based system 15 years ago into a fully renewable system as of today, reducing dramatically the emissions from the energy sector, and also from transport sector. We have reduced 28% of the emissions from the level of 1990, and these reductions from the top level are of course even a bit higher. Next one, please. Thank you. Reaching carbon neutrality requires a cross-sectoral integrated approach. It requires strong leadership, initiative from partners, from companies, from civic society, and a shared understanding, a consensus on these goals. In case of Turku, City Council has decided unanimously about the climate goals and about the climate plan, and has debated climate issues with great interest. Also, our society, students, academia, entrepreneurs, citizens, NGOs are very engaged in climate work, and this is very, very good basis for the work, and at the same time, it enables us to develop solutions together in true partnerships and together with the public and private sectors. Next one, please. It's important to reduce the emissions. That's the main goal, but it's not the only goal. Our world is undergoing a transition from a fossil energy economy, fossil energy, wasteful linear economy, into a renewable energy future, into a circular economy, sustainable use of natural resources. Our vision in Turku is that as being one of the areas, together with other advanced cities and together with many partners, we can be the creators of the future, and the competencies that students in Turku are gaining nowadays, the investments our businesses are making, the innovations that are being developed, are there for the world that is coming, the low carbon, more sustainable operating environment for all of us, contributing to well-being, employment, vitality, also making our cities better places to live at. Next one, please. Clean tech, circular economy, bioeconomy, they are part of our strategy for innovation and business development. Next one, please. The main clusters in Turku are clean, health, experience, maritime, and technology. Next, please. Now follow some examples. Smart Chemistry Park. We are working on industrial symbiosis between different companies and innovations, and this is like a test bed and like an accelerator for startups based on competencies on chemistry, working effectively, solve some of the big problems. Next one, please. The big vision, the Meyer shipyard is one of the largest in the world. The big cruise ships are being built in Turku continuously. The goal of the shipyard is to make carbon neutral cruise ships in the future. Next one, please. And also this means that the whole shipyard, the whole value chain, all this ecosystem has to become carbon neutral, and there's a good roadmap for that. Just that's one example. Next one, please. Textiles, one major source of loss in linear economy. We are working on that. There is a big project to make fibers out of those textiles that can be reused, dramatically reducing the load on the environment. Next one, please. Next, even movies can be made in a carbon negative fashion. Odotus, the Wait, a Finnish movie from 2 years ago, is one of the first movie productions in the world that was carbon negative. Next one, please. In 2020, we were selected among the European Covenant of Mayor Cities for the Covenant Award in the class of mid-sized climate cities. Next one, please. Thank you so much. And to conclude, the goal of carbon neutrality is a shared one. The actions are done together with the companies. There were some examples of companies involved or businesses involved. There are many more, and we hope many more to come. We have 100 climate actions as part of our shared database with all companies, a climate team, and 120 different companies and actors are involved in that work through the actions. Thank you. 8 minutes used.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vevo, and we will have time for some discussion after our next speaker. So we would like to hear even more examples of how you're doing this and interacting with your shareholders, with your stakeholders. Sorry. Our next speaker is Ms. Caroline Bouvard. She's the Deputy Managing Director for Economic Development in Grenoble Alpes Metropole in France. And Grenoble has been one of the EU's green capitals already, and it is also one of the current 100 carbon neutral cities. So Ms. Bouvard, can you please share with us Grenoble's secrets for making the top of these lists for environmental action? The floor is yours.
Thank you, and I will try to share indeed as well as possible what we're trying to do in this field. Thank you for hosting us today and allowing us to discuss this subject. So local decarbonization, contributing to local economies is obviously something that is essential to our current world, and it is especially important for a territory like ours in Grenoble Alpes Metropole, because we're facing, because of our geographical configuration, climate change faster than many other territories. So where is Grenoble? It's in the Alps. We are 550 square kilometers territory, very dense in its okay, so to catch up with time, sorry. As I mentioned, we are facing climate change a bit faster than any other territories, since we already got a 2 degrees raise here in the Alps. And this is obviously something that led us to think about the actions we could set up earlier than many other countries, other cities. We have had what we call in France a climate and air quality plan since 2005 that has allowed us to set goals to reduce both the emission of green gas, and to try to improve air quality, which is also an issue in a valley like ours. So our last edition of this climate plan leads us to target a carbon neutrality in 2050. We're not as good as our colleagues from Turku here, with an objective for 2030 of a diminution of 50% of the GES and 40% of the energy consumption. And we also obviously have a plan for increasing renewable energy, knowing that we can basically only develop photovoltaic and hydroelectricity here, as the wind power is a bit more complicated to develop in our setup, in our maintenance setup. Air quality is also a very big issue, since we still have 4% of our population which is facing above regulation exposure, and about 23% of the population which is still in at-risk areas, areas which are below the levels, but which we still need to monitor. And for this, we have set a pretty strong objective in our climate plan in terms of reduction of NOx and particles, as you can see on the screen. All of this being very important for our urban area, but that means we also need to work out the relationship between our urban area and all the rural and mountainous areas which are surrounding the metropolitan, the urban center, and which require lots of interventions to maintain an equality of treatments despite the constraints that this implies on public transportation especially. So as we want to target a bit more the subject of the how do we involve stakeholders on the climate plan that we have developed, I will not get into detail for the other axes, but just wanted to give you a few examples of how we have been working with inhabitants and especially with companies to make sure that we can ensure that we reach these targets. On one side, with companies, we have we have defined last year an economic development strategy, which targets 4 strategic axes and 80 actions, and with the specific acts on how do we make our metropolitan area resilient, mobilizing economic actors in favor of transition. So very concretely, what does that mean? That means that we have developed with these partners a series of actions that we built with private companies to work with them on how they can support transitions in their own activities. So that means that, for example, we have a series of free diagnostics that we propose for them in terms of energy consumption and mobility, for example. We also have financial support that we propose for both works on insulation or reduction of water consumption in the industry, as well as on the transformation of their fleet of vehicles towards less polluting vehicles. And we also work a lot with the retail world so that they can transform their use so that they reduce their energy consumption. We also have worked with them so that they can involve themselves in a diversity of transforming actions that the companies can decide in their organization so that they actually change their models. So, for example, we're part of a circular economy network that we are developing with companies today, and we have built and will be opening within 3 months a totem site, a pole working on circular economy where companies can work together on their innovations. And we also have supported, for example, initiatives such as the Convention des entreprises pour le climat, the Companies Convention for Climate Change, which supports companies so that they can really change their model, define their raison d'être, their objectives in terms of what the climate change should do to the transformation of their models. To work with citizens, we have set up a citizen convention for climate. We have selected 100 citizens by lottery who worked during 8 months to define a certain number of proposals that they submitted at the end of last year to the metropolitan area so that we could develop actions in 9 categories. And these actions are now our roadmap to make sure that we work both on the 4 areas of production of GES, whether it is housing, mobility, industry, or general consumption. In the same line, as you mentioned, we were last year the European Green Capital, which allowed us to work with a diversity of stakeholders, whether civil society or companies. And this was a very interesting support for us to develop because companies which were not always that concerned by environmental issues were very responsive to the opportunities that was given through the European Capital Program to develop actions. And there were more than 750 actions that were and events that were developed during that year, and 150 of them were started by companies. So that's a good sign for the evolutions in the future. And finally, we are, as you mentioned as well, one of the climate neutral and smart cities of the European Union. And we have already started developing new actions that will respond to the objectives that are set within this program to increase especially the work that we do with both citizens and companies in terms of the energy efficiency of buildings, with the construction of new support systems that can make sure that people actually make the decision to invest both in the housing or in the companies to actually improve the energy efficiencies of their house. And I hope the sound was not too bad, and I tried to stay in time, but obviously we probably went a bit too far, so I hope.
We could understand you, at least speaking from myself. So thank you very much for going ahead with the presentation. And we have about 5 minutes now to bring the panel back and ask a couple of questions. And I think that our last two speakers, Mr. Vevo and Ms. Brevard, talked quite a bit about the incentives offered to local businesses to take part in this. But I'm interested in this answer from all four of our speakers. When you approach companies and businesses and to ask them to join you in these efforts, what economic and social benefits do you explain to them that they will experience as a result, and to civilians as well? Do you have a sort of package that you go around and approach, just sort of knock on the doors and say, we all need to be on the same page here, and this is what it will do for you? So I think I will go back to our first speaker. Let me get my schedule here in front of me.
So as we have been So we have been looking at the environment, society, as well as economy. We wanted to have this virtuous cycle among the three, so that we can make sure that people's livelihoods will also improve. And especially so far in the local in municipalities, environment was something that causes larger costs and had this image of being bad for the economy. However, with the SDGs initiatives, we try to emphasize that it's for the economy, environment, as well as society, that there is this circle going around as we carry out innovation. And as a result of this, we were saying that it will contribute to our lives as well as society and economy. That has been confirmed, and that's why we have the residents as well as businesses on board, and we have created organizations to take on this initiative.
Okay, so that's very proactive. And Mr. Takahashi, your microgrid initiative, I mean, there's no more virtual cycle than that, turning sewage into renewable energy. Did the interest come from the business community, or did it come from the city side initially?
Thank you for your question. Now, sewage, decarbonization of sewage. Well, our city officials have always had the idea. Now, when it comes to the electricity cost, about $3 million worth amount had been paid from outside, had been paid to outside the region. We wanted to keep it inside our region, and also the photovoltaics and wind will be introduced in our areas, and we'll need to maintain these facilities in our area. We need the initial maintenance after 20 years, and then we need to do more decarbonization, which means we need to have people inside our city, within our city, to be able to do all of these. We would like all these activities to be a starter for us to be able to expand decarbonization society. That's what we have been thinking within our prefecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And Mr. Vevo, I asked this question also of our Swedish speaker earlier, because one of the things that's often said about Scandinavian initiatives is that due to the homogeneity of societies, due to the relatively high living standards, things are possible there, like becoming carbon neutral a year early, that may not be possible in other areas. Has Turku identified ways that communities in other parts of the world could adopt some of your practices for moving so quickly?
Thank you. That is a very challenging question. We are very strongly involved in IGES network and cooperation globally. Our mayor is vice president of IGES, but we are also involved in developing circular economy solutions in the whole global network. And of course, there are specifics that are related to the context, like you were referring to. But on the other hand, quite often, actually very often, the climate practices and circular economy practices in particular have a strong economic benefit in them. They actually help to save money and resources. And maybe we can leave the target years perhaps aside a little bit, but thinking of the well-being of the local societies, they are certainly, may I say, a winning ticket or a good choice for societies in different contexts when applied with a good knowledge of the local circumstances. We actually did discuss this also when in the preparation of the summary for urban policymakers of the 6th assessment report of the IPCC. There was a consultation of cities with people from different parts of the world, and there was quite much that we could share. So I'm optimistic about that, and Turku is involved, and other Nordic cities as well also in global cooperation through IGES and other means. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Brevard, Grenoble must be so proud to carry these mantles of carbon neutral city and already an EU green capital. So do you find that your citizens are already on board? Everybody's already convinced that this is the way they have to go, and short-term sacrifices are all worth it for the long-term goals?
Oh, I would say so, yeah. What we can see is that both on the citizen side and on the economic stakeholders, they can see that it is in their own interest to make the necessary changes. Obviously, not everybody can change their ways overnight, but there is a consciousness that if we want to maintain the attractiveness of our territory, if we want to be able to make sure that people want to come live and work here, we need to maintain the quality of life. And we've been subject to air pollution for a long time before we managed to reduce it to the level we have today. So it's something that is very present for, and has been present for a long time in everybody's mind. And it's also a requirement of the days. We can see that the world has changed, and the requirement of companies, clients, of population, of the talents you want to hire require that you have this consciousness and put forward these changes in your economy and in the way you work. So yeah, this is something that a flame that everybody wants to carry on. And the Green European Capital was definitely a good way to mobilize everybody around this subject, and we will move forward with the climate neutral cities now.
Thank you very much. I think we've had so many inspiring examples today from panel 2. Thank you very much. That's going to wrap it up for me today. I will be back with you tomorrow to learn a lot more about decarbonization in cities. And now I will hand the program back to Mr. Mori.
Thank you very much, all speakers, for your exciting presentation and your insights. Also, thank you for Terry for your excellent facilitation of the discussion in the panels. All right, it is time to summarize the discussions of today. So let me invite my colleague, Ms. Yasu Takahashi, Program Director, City Task Force, IGES. Ms. Kataoka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mori-san. In closing, I would like to emphasize a few points which highlighted today's discussion. So the global goal of climate neutrality by at least 2050 is highly ambitious, and it demands a major shift in our societies. Both EU regions and Japan recognize that cities have an important role to achieve climate neutral goal and already launched initiatives to support urban climate actions. The core initiatives are the 100 climate neutral and smart cities in EU and the decarbonization leading areas in Japan, which are focused on this event. Cities are places of experimentations and innovation, and the leading cities and regions should be rolled out to the other regions to increase ambitions at global level. Today we heard the presentation from 9 cities from Japan and Europe, and the themes on the themes of the climate risk and resilience, gender, local economies, and climate actions, followed by the scene-setting presentations. I summarized some points here. First, through the presentations, it is pointed out that the maximization of the use of renewable energy at local level is very important, not only to address the current energy crisis, but also from the perspective of long-term energy security. It is very important to integrate renewable energy development application into the overall urban planning. That is challenging, but that is very key to promote local renewable energy use. Climate change measures need to be addressed from the broad perspective, including environment aspects such as air pollution control, circular economy such as sewage, sludge, and biomass utilization, improvement of quality of life residents, in particular from the perspective of elderly people and also people in vulnerable situations, and also the stimulating local economies. Again, integrated approach is very important in planning and implementation of climate actions. Consideration of local characteristics is very important elements in promoting local climate actions. The presenters repeatedly stressed that climate neutrality requires a bold social transformation and a change in people's behavior. The inclusion of gender perspective in climate change policy and urban planning, and promotion of youth education and participation are introduced at today's panels. In sum, whole society approach is very important. So the challenge faced by cities the identified today is finance, and also the capacity of local authority and governance governance, and then and also the how to adopt the disrupting technologies is also a challenge. So in this perspective, the cities need to the support of national, also the international level. And then also international learning from each other is very important. So the EU and Japan has already recognized these regional challenges and provided support to address them. But further support support and international cooperation is needed. So tomorrow there will be presentation on innovation, finance, and inter-regional cooperation among these challenges. We hope you, the participants, will join us tomorrow's event too, and think together about how the region is trying to tackle these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasuka. It's a very good, I think, summary, very also in a concise style. Thank you very much. With the announcements for tomorrow. All right. Thank you very much for everyone for today's panels and discussions. And before we completely close out today's session, I would like to ask a favor, all of you in the audience. When this session concludes, you will be presented with a survey. Your feedback is very important for us to improve future sessions. So please take a moment to fill it out. So thank you very much again for your cooperation today. Thank you and bye-bye.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.